Welcome back to Life Chapters Money Choices, the podcast where we explore how money intersects with meaning across the various chapters of a life well lived. That's really what we're trying to do. And you know, when people say retirement, what often comes to mind is slowing down or stepping back or maybe playing a bit of golf or whatever it is that you enjoy doing. But I think for today's guest, stepping back has never really been in her vocabulary, I suspect. Sandra Gordon is a trailblazer in the South African media industry, someone who needs very little introduction to those who've been following her career. She's built, scaled and sold and reinvented some of the country's most iconic titles, from her early banking days actually to founding Wag the Dog Publishers, from editorial floors to corporate boardrooms. Sandra's story is about evolution and not just ambition, and she's doing it all over again. But what really fascinates us today is that what comes after the accolades, after the exits, after success in inverted commas, because that's where meaning really started speaking, I think, more loudly than titles. And joining me as always is Kim Potgieter, Director at Chartered Wealth, and someone who helps people do exactly this, reimagine retirement as a new beginning and not closing the book, certainly opening the page on a new chapter. So let's dive in. Sandra, it's so good to have you in the studio. And you've launched your first company back in your 30s. You grew it to, I think it was, 63 magazines under Prime Media. You then reinvented again. Take us all the way back. What drew you to the publishing world initially?
I think you used the word evolution. For me, that would be revolution. I love challenges. I love being brave. And I like trying new things. I also don't like being told what to do. So it makes it very awkward when you're in corporates particularly, that people tell you what to do all the time. And very often, as a woman at board level, I found it quite difficult to put up my hand and then let it remain in the air while they kept debating what I had to say. So I've been quite well known for moving away from things even when I was being successful. I mean, Primary is a very good example. I left after 4 years of being on the board, and probably, as William Kirsch told me at the time, it was a very awkward time for him and for the board, but I decided that I wanted to go into the film industry, so of course I went to Sasani and got very interested in the film industry. It's a fascinating industry to be in, but not very lucrative, and filled with a lot of creative people who need a lot of guidance. Not unlike publishing in a way in its early days. But publishing, when I first entered it in the 80s, was a lucrative environment to be in. Big publishers, small publishers, you could start things with very little money actually. And another thing I like a lot is making money in the first year. If I'm not going to do that, then I would rather drop the project. So I like the challenge, I like the differences, I like change, which has probably led me to starting another business after having retired and sold my business on just before COVID, very luckily for me. And sort of dawdled along doing other stuff, but kept my influence going in the industry because I love it. I love the media industry. And I'm very conscious of the very crucial role that publishers play. If you don't get the content together with the revenue, you don't really have a product at all.
And that, to me, I mean, I also love the media industry and have a little bit less experience than you do in the game, but I've also seen this evolution from sort of the early 2000s to where we are now, and that marrying the content with the commercial element. There's some in the digital realm who are doing it quite well at the moment, and you're seeing, for example, Rob Rose has launched Currency, and they're starting to attract some advertising. We know Alec Hogg in Biz News has done well. MoneyWeb had something of a reinvention. I know you were involved in that. And then you look on the other side, up on the hill there at Arena, and I worry that things are going wrong there, and you're not having that commercial married to content. Just given your experience and your love of the media industry, what's happening in the industry at the moment, and what publishers are getting it right and which are getting it wrong, and why do you think that is?
I have a number of luncheon clubs that I've kept in touch with, and every time I go, and most of these people are still working in their 40s and maybe 50s, they're complaining bitterly and they're quite down about what's happening. There's no gears left in the industry. There's no relationship building, not none, but it's very limited. It's become quite corporatized. And it's across the board, from the media agencies, ad agencies, all the way through to the media owners themselves. And I find that they just don't get the need for a commercial product that still does the job. You mentioned Rob Rose and his Crowded Currency. I was one of the first subscribers. Great talents. But somehow or other they've understood that there's a commercial element, which so many of they think it's a creative pursuit in a way. And it's quite a vibey thing, and it's powerful. A journalist can be extremely powerful, even today. And that goes to their heads. So they don't... Let me use another analogy, if I may. Art is an example. I've been following William Kentridge for 30 years. And when he started out, he did some stuff. I thought it was some of his best stuff. But he really understood that he needed a gallery that would support him and promote his creativity. Because what he does, and he does it extremely well, is very focused. But he needed the Goodman Gallery in his day to promote him. And look at where he is now. I mean, he's extremely talented. So if you can just take that creative, journalistic content talent. I had an editor once who said there's a horrific dynamic that exists between sales and advertising and the content side of publishing. And if you can get that right as a publisher, it's still a great business to be in. Yeah,
I couldn't agree with you more. I always found in radio, which is very similar to publishing, there was a disconnect between the sales team and those who are on the front lines, delivering the content, speaking to the CEOs. And I'm given, business media hat on here. And when I then moved to Fine Music Radio and did that more independently and had also a hand in driving revenue and driving sales, it was a much easier conversation to have because I knew what the angle was, what a particular business from a brand perspective was trying to achieve, what their objectives are, and how we could plug into that. For example, if you're a financial services firm like an Alex Forbes who are going business to business, they're now building a big retail business. So they want to connect to independent financial advisors. Let's have more of those on the show. We can get the brand in front of them. And it's just a lot easier to have that conversation than with the sales team who kind of have an idea of what this is that you do, but don't know how to sell it. So it's marrying those two that I think the really forward-thinking and innovative new players like the Currency as well are doing. I want to come back to your personal journey, though. And, those pivots, what was your inner voice saying each time you revolutionized your own personal entrepreneurial journey?
I have a fabulous story that I know that Kim wants me to tell because she's never forgotten it. It's somewhat embarrassing. Fortunately, both my parents have passed. I grew up in a very nice environment in the 60s and the 50s. I mean, I was born in 52. So life was wonderful. You played in the streets and you made your own go-karts and all that other stuff that these people of my age talk about. And when I went to high school, we moved from a very middle-class suburb to a very posh one. So I went onto the playground for the very first day, and I didn't know a soul in the school, and there were 1,200 pupils. The whole of the northern suburbs was fed by Hyde Park High School. And I was alone for the first time, and I'd been very popular at junior school and played sport, and I did well, and I didn't know a soul. And there was quite a lot of snobbery and putting downness. And my dad had invested a lot of money in getting the house going in Rivonia and putting us into decent schools. So during the school holidays one year, I was 14, and my mom said we should go to the movies, to the Cinerama, which was in town. So it was a big deal. And I was growing tall very rapidly, and I didn't have any decent clothes to wear. So she said, it doesn't really matter. You can just wear your school uniform. So I put on my little grey skirt and whatever sandals I was wearing at the time and a little white blouse. And I went to the Cinerama, and lo and behold, the owner of the Cinerama's daughter was at school with me. He owned the place. And I walked in, and she saw me in a school uniform. I was ridiculed for at least a year. Girls at high school
at that age can be dangerous. Extremely cruel.
And I had never really understood the money thing because we'd never had to worry about it. And I remember thinking to myself at the time, I never want to go back to this and feel the same feeling of being other, different, but not nice different, not controlling it. It was a horrid experience, but it really stuck with me. So my whole life I've wanted to have the security and comfort that I believe money gives you. It also gives you independence, which is a big, Kim knows from the value statement thing that we do, that independence is one of my top values. And I'd like that. You can't really be terribly independent unless you're able to say to yourself, I don't really have to worry about money anymore. So I started saving from then, started making handbags and all sorts of things that I sold. And I used to take little plants out of other people's gardens and put them into plastic bags and sell them and just make money. And then always, I've always done this. I just hadn't realized until I wrote some thoughts down this morning. I've always wanted the feeling that I could give back and save those from going through anything awful in their teenage years, because it has such a stamp on you.
Wow, it's remarkable, Kim, listening to Sandra's story, how those formative experiences with money emblazon themselves on your psyche and then become this huge driver in your life. And I think sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. This is obviously a very positive example where you say, I do not want to feel less than again. I do not want to feel like I've been judged unfairly based on material circumstances. How often do you see this particular archetype come up when you sit down with clients and you say, right, let's analyze, your money story, and it, then traces back to that early childhood memory?
So, Michael, I think all of us have it. Sandra's story has always stuck with me. She told me that many years ago. And, as we've worked together, we've seen, it's the importance of unpacking it. But each client that I work with has that story, but a different story. None of us have got the same ones. And only really when it's conscious can we go, well, actually, it's just a belief. It's not really my reality. Because the problem for all of us is if we don't, I'm in my 50s, and I still have moments where something happens to me and I over-respond to it. And when I'm over-responding, I have to stop myself, and then I have to remember that I'm not that whatever 8-year-old, 9-year-old little girl where it was happening. I'm now a grown-up woman. And what's happening now is not the same as what happened then, because otherwise we can go from 0 to 360 like so quickly. You can think you've got enough, and then the next minute you're destitute and you're on the street and you own nothing. Your brain really does this kind of things to us. So the whole thing is just to unpack that money story, and I think we each and every one of us have it. We're just not so conscious about it.
When did you, Sandra, start becoming more conscious about what your money story is? Or was it something that because of that experience you were fairly conscious of from a young age? Or is it something that you've now, having done work with Kim and sitting down and doing the value statement, really started to understand in a bit more granular detail?
It's always played an amazingly large part of my life, money. It gives me meaning, it gives me that independence, it gives me confidence. All those things. I just wanted to do it myself, though. I didn't want to have to rely on anybody else. That's the independence streak coming through. So Kim and I have had a lot of chats about this, and it's been very helpful for her to focus on things. And, of course, to get the things out of my head that have been there for years, for decades, and I hadn't ever really thought about. I've never thought of money as a problem, though. I've been saving since I was little. I started in a bank, of all things, having almost failed mathematics, ended up in a bank. I went on a thing called an accelerated training course for women. They taught me everything about banking, how to buy and sell shares, how to read balance sheets. And my best subjects were things like English and art and history, and then they realized that I should go into marketing, and I found my niche and then studied marketing. And I really like it a lot because it just gives you so much opportunity in any business that I think it's very important. But that financial side of me, that first 7 years, very formative years of my career, was extremely important. I worked with Conrad Strauss, for instance. He was a very stern person, but I learned an enormous amount from him. And the bank teaches you discipline. It teaches you how to do things with your money. you were frowned upon if you didn't take care of your money. It was a precious thing to look after because it was so pivotal to everything you would do.
And so were you always very hands-on in developing your own investment portfolio and financial plan, or did you sit down with a planner early on?
Pretty much I did my own thing in the beginning. When my dad died and he left, I had to look after my mom as well because she wasn't very erudite when it came to finance. She'd been a very clever person. She had budgets. She taught me to budget from the age of 8. When we went shopping, she had a budget and she wrote down what everything cost and she ticked it off and checked the slip when we got home. So that kind of discipline in finance has always been with me. My brother's a financial guy, he's a CA, so he's also, my dad was very good at that kind of thing. So I grew up with it and loved it, but it was just a chunk of what I really needed to do. But there were things I wanted to do in my life, and it's travel and do different things and invest in other businesses and start other businesses if I want to, just with the knowledge that I can. And that's a really nice feeling. But you have to be very disciplined to get to that stage.
Yeah.
I found Kim because I had a previous, no names, no pactual, financial advisor who was also a personal friend, never a good thing to do, golfing buddies, that sort of stuff. And it didn't work. It really didn't work. And I started to look around, and I don't know how long Chartered had been going at that point. I just Googled places near me.
Yeah.
And started to do some research into the people and the directors and their philosophies, because that's another very important thing in publishing. If you don't have the reason for existing as a brand in any business, actually, you might as well just close the door.
What is your why? Yeah, as Seneca
exactly.
says. Yeah,
Your reason for existence. And they had, I thought, an extremely different one. And I went to see Kim, and it was a slam dunk for us. I just think we clicked. And even then, Kim, I think you were very much early days of that, helping people to do things and giving back in your own way to people and building them and building their confidence. I remember sitting at one of your very first meetings, and there were men and women round the table. And the men were starting to complain that they had worked their whole lives, and now when they came home and found out that their wives were still playing tennis with friends or going shopping, they couldn't, what the heck, all this time I've spent, and now I'm here, and now they're not here for me. So it was an amazing thing. That was the one thing I learned. The other thing I learned is that you went around the room and said, are you fearful of retiring? And when it got to me, I said, I'm not fearful of retiring at all. I'm fearful of dying. And I still feel that way. I think death is a horrid thing. But retirement is, if you've been careful with your money, which most of your clients have, and with the guidance of the heavily experienced people within your business, is just phenomenal. And no pushing. There's no pushing. There's no, just sell this now. We can do a quick thing. I've never been a quick thing people with money. I've done clever things at clever times, but I've been careful.
Yeah.
And really just having a good company like Kim's around has just been a game changer for Michelle and I.
Well, there are no shortcuts. I mean, you look at the way Warren Buffett acquired his wealth, and over the first half of his life, it's a very flat line, and then you start to see the J of the hockey stick. And that's the benefit of discipline, of patience, of compounding over time, and that there are no quick fixes for. Yes, you can have if you're now in a stage in your career where you can be a bit more of an angel investor, you might invest in 5 companies and one just hits the lights out. You've earned the right to play. Coming back to retirement, though, interesting that you say it wasn't retiring that you feared, but death. Because I've often felt that in my own life, and looking up at my father, for example, he didn't have much of a plan as he went into retirement. It was a bit forced. There was a business partner who stabbed him in the back, and I feel he lost a lot of his purpose and identity because there was no plan. And he died fairly young, fairly soon after retirement, because I think part of it was just not having that reason anymore. I don't think he actually thought about his why. So how much thinking has gone into your why in retirement? Because I know you've actually started something up that we'll get to. But when you thought about, okay, well, I've earned the right to really be a lot more selective about what I choose to do and choose not to do. How much work went into what is Sandra Gordon now in this next chapter?
It has probably been the most difficult thing that I've ever had to do, frankly. When I think back childhood, and there were all support systems like parents and then partners and consultancies that helped you and formulated things, but it was coming to the reality of all the things that I'd built up for 50 years. I worked for 50 years. All the contacts, all the things that I'd learned seemed to be squeezed into something not as meaningful as it had been. And so that challenge for me has been probably one of my biggest ever. And without Chartered, it would have been, I'm not quite sure what I would have done. I flippantly tell people that people say, well, now you can work in the garden. Well, I've always worked in the garden. I did it since a child. We all do in my family. You can go out to the theatres. I've always gone to theatre. You can play with the pets, yes, and walk them. Yes, I've always done that. Yeah. So there was nothing particularly new. And then I tried a whole lot of stuff, and I knew I wouldn't take to it. I started painting. Wasn't particularly good at it. Didn't enjoy it at all. I tried crossword puzzles, even worse. Then people keep telling me, my niece tells me, she's a writer, she tells me all the time, please write, please will you write? Kim, what's her name? Please will you write? I just don't have it in me any longer to write. I don't particularly want to. But the joy of starting a new business again, it's like a little flame that just lights me up. It's what I've done for so long. I've started so many new businesses and angel investor, as you say. Those are big things that just take me up. It just moves me forward. And that's why I agreed to go into this other opportunity, and I'm really enjoying it. It can be stressful because one's anxiety levels get to a different level as well, when I found. And when I speak to friends of my age, they say they worry about things that they never worried about before. When I say worried, you just feel anxious about them, which I never even noticed before.
But it's so interesting for me that what you've said is you've found what that flame is, and you've realized that you don't have to snuff that flame just because someone out there, and we've done it time immemorial, put a line in the sand, and there's a date, and there's this idea of what retirement should look like. And Kim, you've always had this retirement approach and framework. How important is it to continue to find that flame? And what really stands out for you when you sat down with Sandra in Sandra's story about figuring out what is going to make her want to get out of bed every morning? Because I couldn't agree with you more, Sandra. We do all of those things that everyone says, oh, you can do. Well, that's what we do every day or on the weekend. And what changes really?
But I think what was really important with Sandra, and just listening to her again today, it's come back to me. There was a lot of work that we all did together, coming to the point where she did sell her business, where she could get the maximum amount of money for it. And I find a lot of people hold on to their businesses too long. So I see people holding on, and then they get too old, and then when they need to sell it, people take advantage of them, and they get it for a much lower price. So for me, there was a sweet spot with Sandra, and the idea was really to get her to let go of what she had then, because it was too big to be managing into your 70s and 80s, because then she couldn't have this as she's talking about, you start changing as a person. So I think her big success was she sold her business at the right time. Her next thing was that we never ever said Sandra just had to do retirement and she must just travel, because we know that that's not enough, not for a kind of personality type like her, where she's always going to be wanting that challenge of starting something new. But the important part that it became less work and more of other stuff. And it was great that she had the opportunity to be able to spend more time with Michelle. They could both do their traveling. They've been able to do so much more than if she had just her business that she was in. So I think it was a process, because I still remember the day, how hard it was of letting go and convincing her, first of all, that she had enough money. I mean, the many hours Steph sat with her going, Sandra, you do have enough money. Are you sure I have enough money? So there was a whole lot to get to this point. But I think she really did let go at the right time, and what that's done. And she kept, I always remember, she's kept all her contacts. So she didn't go into retirement. I get so cross with people when they retire and then they want to stay home and they think people are going to find them 5 or 6 years later. People forget you.
Yeah.
So she kept her network going. She kept mixing with people that were the right people. And at all the times, she was keeping her brain also at that level where she was able to interact in conversations and she was knowing what was going on in the market. So in that way, she's put all the right steps in place to be able to do this new business now, because she never, ever stopped. But what she did do is she found a little bit more balance for herself and for her personal life.
Yeah, that to me, and it came through in Andrew Mackey's conversation that we had with him, the idea of cultivating contacts throughout a career and not keeping those going and alive into retirement through luncheons. And you mentioned luncheons, Sandra, and regular interactions, I think is so important, because once you also, if you're certainly coming from corporate, you lose that big label of a big firm behind you. Sometimes, setting up a meeting becomes a lot more difficult. You've always been very entrepreneurial though, Sandra, so I think quite different from where you're sitting. You mentioned, though, something very interesting around purpose and I think leadership. And when it comes to mentorship, if you've got a bit more time now and you look at the media industry, how much of what you do currently centers around ensuring that we develop this pipeline of media entrepreneurs and future leaders to keep the vibrancy of the industry and the ecosystem going in the work that you do?
2 interesting things have happened to me in the last 3 or 4 months. I was asked to give a talk to a bunch of young women who do not understand traditional media as we know it, that radio, television. But they were doing media planning for massive clients, so it was all going digital. And there was no balance. And the MD called me and she said, could you please come and talk to them about it? So I thought, what am I going to talk about? So what I did is I went back to the French Revolution and, the Fourth Estate and all that fancy stuff. And I told them about, they were transfixed. So I just took dates, the first television set in the world, the first advertising agency in England, in America, in South Africa, the first big media company. They were aghast. And then they said afterwards, could we ask some questions? And I said, certainly. So one said, I need to go first. And she said, could you tell us about your career? And I thought, well, I'm erudite about it today because I had to think it on my feet. And I started telling them about the different things that I'd done. And I suddenly realized I've done an enormous amount of different things across an enormous amount of industries. You have 60 magazines and 50 of them are specialist magazines. You get to know about a lot of industries very quickly and meet the most amazing people, leaders in their field, and learn from them. So that was standing ovation. They gave me gifts. They've just kept up. They're following me on LinkedIn. That was all very nice. And then 2 weeks ago, I was given an award for my contribution to the media industry. And another one of the winners, who's a good friend of mine, he runs a very big media agency, he stood up and said he had 2 mentors in his life, and he mentioned Harry Herber, who you might remember from Media Shop.
Yeah.
And he said, and I'd be amiss if I didn't mention Sandra Gordon. She has been an enormous, and I went, I didn't even think I had that kind of influence over this fellow. He really has done well. And I just thought he had done it all by himself. Maybe because that's much how we did when we were younger. And I went to him afterwards and I really thanked him for it. And he said, why thank me? I was thanking you because you were an unbelievable mentor, and I'd never thought of that. Because I did try coaching, by the way. There is a difference. And I went on the training and I met with a whole bunch of psychologists and things, which was really nice. And then I was given my first opportunity and I thought, I can't do this. I just can't. And it was about 5 years ago, maybe just after I'd retired, because there's a lot of moaning. I get into the office and my boss doesn't say hello to me, and they don't seem to really like me, and I just can't seem to be able to get an increase. I was due to get an increase in August. So did you go and ask? No, they're supposed to give me the increase in August. So there was all that, and I thought, wow, I can't do it because I would be too, you're very gentle, Kim, in just getting people to see things differently. Yeah. I don't have that.
But there's a big difference. There's a big difference between coaching and mentorship, where mentorship is giving back some of the insight and knowledge and wisdom you've acquired through building and selling and exiting businesses over time. And I think that's much more authentic and authentically you. So having heard that you were a silent mentor, or mentor without realizing it, to some pretty big hitters out there, has that now recast or reframed your own view of yourself? And are you now being a little bit more intentional about going there and maybe being a bit more actively mentoring and who to mentor?
I just don't think I ever realized that I was doing it. I'm extremely proud of particularly young women that I've had in business who've gone on to run their own business highly successfully, all in different fields. And Michelle was with me when I won the award, and people were coming over and saying, I will never forget you. Do you know what you did? You called me into the office and said, you can sell. And they said, well, I burst into tears and I said, I can't do this. And you got up and locked your door and made me sit in your office and said, you will cold call and I will listen to you and we will do a sale by the end of the day. And she said, and I did it. And I've never forgotten it. I had no memory of that. So that's my kind of mentoring. It's just so encourage in almost an aggressive way, actually, to get people to realize their own. And the same goes for journalists. I worked for journalists that I thought were really great, and they just thought they were good because they were journalists. And I taught them how you could become publishers. So I really enjoyed that kind of stuff. And that maybe leads up to what I've been invited to do now with two good friends of mine in the industry. One who is highly entrepreneurial and has 13 businesses in his fold, and another who's decided to become a coach and mentor and is doing extremely well. And he was a big shot in multi-choice. So we've got together. They're both working. I'm kind of doing things. I'm starting with the marketing. We're launching now.
Is this Pulse?
Yeah, and that's a giving back. That for me is another giving back.
So tell me a little bit more about Pulse, because I think you've got an event lined up for February of next year with some
Indeed, our first event.
Seriously cool speakers on the agenda.
Well, yeah. Thanks to Ken Verigis, who's one of my partners. He shoots high. He wanted Brené Brown, and then when we got the prize, we went, oh, heavens. However, Seth Godin, who is one of the lead speakers and is not cheap either, but he doesn't travel now, so we're beaming him straight from New York. And the other, Ken Verigis, we managed to get Rassi Erasmus to talk about leadership as this final speaker, though. This is clever.
Yeah.
Because who isn't?
Yeah.
Acknowledged as one of the best leaders in the country now. Transformation,
yeah.
Valediction, taking people from very little to something very high, so scientifically, so analytical in his approach, so the planning and the organizing, the smarts.
And so humble, when you read his book and, what he's come from as well. He had his own demons that he had to slay. So real draw card there.
I had to write his bio. It took me about a day because I had to feed through masses of stuff. So it is giving back because we feel that the industry needs a bit of a spurt and they need to get together again and enjoy. And I'm focusing on not the content side of it because I've done a lot of that in my past. This is on the sales and the commercial side of getting people confident about what they sell and how all the relationships are starting to fade. They're frittering away. I've slowly watched it.
Do you think COVID played a role in that?
Of course it did. Yeah. I mean, businesses closed down. I know a lot of publishers who went under at that stage. I don't know who spoke to me and said, sell your business the year before COVID started. So that
was serendipitous timing, absolutely.
Indeed. So I was very fortunate. And as Kim said, it was very good timing for me. And I watched what happened to friends during COVID, but a lot of them did succeed. It's not just COVID that was a breaking point we hadn't envisaged, but a lot of media agencies and ad agencies sold their businesses. Shareholders made a lot of money by selling to very large groups like WPP. And they're starting to withdraw. They don't know. They're not doing as well as they were. But they came into this country and they bought everything that moved virtually. So it became a corporatized place that had been run by very entrepreneurial go-getters.
Yeah.
And I want to see that come back, and it is coming back. And there's people like Pepe Murray who bought his business back. What a successful man. He's one of my speakers. And Mark Abel, who also went overseas, come back, started. I mean, they're doing such great stuff, and we can learn so much from them. And the thing, our payoff line is Pulse Media Leadership Reimagined. So that's exactly what it is, because leadership, you have to reimagine the whole of everything. You can't just say in the business, I think I'll employ 2 new people, or we might have a new strategy session. It's a fundamental change. It's exactly what Russie's done and a lot of other people. And that's what we're going to get through to the industry. And we repeat it annually. I'd really like to start my Woman in the Media thing that I ran for 10 years. That's been lying there. I always thought that women didn't have a name in media, and I know that I could actually name some of them, both on the content and journalism side. But those of my friends are feeling just as downtrodden as they were before. It's really been a switch in the last 3 to 5 years that I've noticed.
Yeah, but the zeitgeist for what you're doing, I think, couldn't be better because of what we're going through, the timing. It's not just that we're trying to recover from COVID, that there has been this shift in the ownership dynamics amongst the big agencies. There's also a lot of chatter and talk about new technologies and artificial intelligence and what is that going to mean for the agency of the future, for the content creators. But I do sense there's this new entrepreneurial element amongst journalists that I chat to, understand the power of their brands and the credibility. I mean, you look at the Edelman Trust Barometer and who's right up there. You know, it's civil society, it's business, it's and media, in particular the old school Fourth Estate type media. Not so much the new media, which is interesting because it's, you know, the new media, the Facebooks, the X's came and hoovered up all the revenue, but that's not necessarily where the trust resides. So I think there's a big business case to be made for a resurgence and a revival. And this Pulse Media Leadership Reimagined, I think, is the perfect name for what hopefully will be a new era in the South African media landscape.
Certainly that's our biggest wish, because it's a wonderful industry. And you go back to the Fourth Estate. It's so important to have it. My cousin is an ex-judge, and he helped write the Constitution, and he is very pro the media and then the balance with the legal fraternity.
Yeah,
it's a wonderful thing if it comes right with the public.
Yeah. And that's why I also worry about whistleblower protection and some threats that have been made against those in the media most recently. And we see the likes on the investigative side of John Wick, and they're doing great work exposing what's going on at Tembisa. Personally, I've had a run-in writing about the Bonitas scandal, which is still unfolding with the Pretoria Mafia, and people reaching out to me say, Michael, just make sure, you know, personal details are scrubbed. They don't know where your kids go to school. That is real. That is the lived experience, but it is so important. It's foundational, I think, for democracy, for South Africa and the project of South Africa to survive, for us to have a vibrant and truly independent Fourth Estate. I just want to come back to Kim. Sandra's story is so interesting. There's so many strings and facets to it, but I mean, looking back in the themes and the lessons, we're on episode 14 of this magnificent podcast that is just growing organically and it's got its life of its own. But what new perspective do you think Sandra brings to this arc of self-discovery and reinvention that you'd like to end off on?
The word that comes to mind just listening and watching her through the years is courageousness. So the way she's come, I mean, she's a trailblazer, but she's showing people courage to be able to do this next chapter differently. And I think yes, her passion is in the media, but anybody in any industry can be learning from her and watching her. You know, you're not done. You need to take that wisdom. You need to take that energy. You need to take, in her words, that gees. Bring it out. Keep keep spreading it, because that is this being courageous can be contagious. And I think that's what people are needing. People are too quickly stepping back and, saying, I'm done. But why? I mean, if we're going to be living till 100, we should be adding all this value right through. So yeah, for me, I'm privileged to have watched her journey, and I know there's lots more to come, and I'm excited for all of that.
Yeah, and you can see it. We might live to 150, given what the Chinese have come out of the pill over the weekend. I don't know if you saw that story,
Yes,
which is, that raises a whole new conversation altogether. But I think, Sandra Gordon, thank you very much for sharing some of your insights, your passion, your courage, and reminding us that we can reinvent multiple times through a career, but it doesn't end at some predetermined date in the future. It ends when in our heads we tell ourselves it ends, or it continues if we tell ourselves it continues. So thank you very much for sharing with us here on Life Chapters Money Choices.
Thank you, Mark. It was lovely to speak with you, and very erudite questions. And Kim, as forever, it's couldn't do it without you, and with Steph and your team. So thanks very much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Well, if you're in a season of reimagining what's next, let Sandra's story give you some courage, and let Kim and her team at Chartered help you build the bridge from dreams to design. This was Life Chapters Money Choices. I'm Michael Avery. Until next time, stay curious, stay courageous, and never stop rewriting your definition of success. Take care.